We're about to start. Great. Okay. Um, so, um, and we got lots of stuff, new things for today. So this is going to be have lots of interesting surprises for all of us. Do we have or I guess do you, Alan, have most of the things that the others may want to show, or do you have nothing and they will show them themselves? Such as
I think I have 90% of them,
okay,
including
no,
Jimmy
that's great.
contributions. Oh,
If you have 90%, then can we make a list in terms of what order to go in? Or
I have
do you have a tentative list?
yeah, I have a Woodring's presentation, but that's mostly about the general project of scenes in China.
I've seen everything, I think,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
just asking the order.
I don't know your thought on the order. I can show them in sequence.
If you have a list, if you can just say, just tell me what that is. So I don't know if I have everything myself here.
So from the Chinese scholar, I have three. Chen Bo's cultural space presentation, Summer Palace presentation by Dr. Yang, and Wu Jun's review of Chinese scenes research. And Jimmy provided some links to North Korean use
Okay.
of scenes in their propaganda. Also, Summer Palace by Qi Ji. I myself did some research on Chinese online literature, but
Okay, so there's all right. So I didn't know that there's Summer Palace from Qi Ji as well. So that's new. I haven't seen that. Okay.
Just a video link by Dr. Qi.
Okay. Anything from Brandon? Are you there, Brandon?
Hi, sorry, finishing eating. The one thing, I'm sorry I didn't send out an email about this, but we were thinking about having, Terry has to go at the end of class, but for those of you who are interested in gentrification, if you want to stay after and we can like have a discussion around that. And then if there's interest, maybe it could become like a regular type meeting.
Okay, but during the main session, do you have anything you sent?
Oh, no.
Okay, no, that's the simple answer for now. Just to try to see what's on our agenda for today, and because we've got lots of things coming in. Okay, well, the main news is the good news for those of you who are with us today is that we got lots of new interesting material that's come in from last Monday. I think it was just a week ago. 4 or 5 of us, the TAs, Qi Ji and I, chatted about what's going on and what illustrates her general point that there's a lot of new work on scenes and the like in China. And what is there that we don't really know about specifically? If there's some 100 persons working on, or 100 papers, I guess, on scenes activities, what kinds of things are they doing? And so that's the same sort of question I was just raising with Alan about what's the cultural industry field look like? What are all these people doing? And even during the session when we were all chatting online, Qi Ji then connected to 3 leading people in China, and they all have sent us new videos and new materials that we can get that give us a dramatically new picture of some things that I had never seen until the last week. Then things have been coming in even today. So I would say, what if I start with 3 or 4 minutes just on the first background reading, which is what led us in this Asian direction, and then soon go to maybe Bo Chen's presentation, and I think we can Fallon, if you've got these all, if we can have maybe his video and his PowerPoint and his audio together, that would be that would be great. I won't try to go on everything beyond that, but at least as a start, that I think this gives us sort of a logical bigger picture. Okay, what's the logical bigger picture here? A lot of the research, as I've said for the whole course, is about Europe and the US and North America and the like. And this is where there's been a lot of social science for many years, and we have systematically not done as much work outside the West, especially Asia. But Asia is a super important new growing area in the world. China is in the lead. And it's changing the world for the present and the future. We don't know that much about it, but we do know that there's a massive change from export, investment, hardworking people saving their money and not consuming, to consuming, doing things which can be taking a vacation, which may be dancing, which may be singing karaoke. But has these become a new focus of the Chinese economy, the Chinese government, the Chinese social lives? This is going to change everybody else, and we won't be just competing for masks that are made in China. That is, this is a turn to domestic activities in ways that are a huge challenge for the Chinese as well as for the rest of the world. Okay, given that, we in our SCENES project, well, the SCENES project grows out of what's called the Urban Innovation Project, title of the course. And this goes back for some 30 years. So there are people we work with for in some cases, 20, 30 years, who were in Korea, who were in Japan, and then a series who had been visiting from China. So we started talking with them specifically about what are the theories of consumption. That is, well, let me add, China is not unique. The whole world is in the process of paying much more attention, investing more, spending more time on consumption. But most of the theories we have are about production. And that's true everywhere. It's just that China's changing faster and is a bigger, more important player in this respect. So we have on our reading list The Cities and Entertainment Machine, which recognizes the importance of entertainment and consumption. And this in turn grows out of 7 books on the new political culture. One big focus of which was the rise of what were called social issues. And social issues, race, class, gender, social movements, politics around civil rights, these kinds of things, demonstrations, Hong Kong. These are new issues which transform the normal past left-right politics of, say, against or in favor of more welfare state activity. That's the classic old politics of socialism versus the market, if you will. And then the new politics we add on to that. But then if we then start to analyze how do these new issues work, we get into consumption and major questions. So the Cities and Entertainment Machine basically was a review of the literature on consumption in economics, political science, sociology, anthropology, and it put forth maybe 40 or 50 propositions about how do these things work and why. What do we know? And at least that was heartening to find we do have some ideas out there, but nobody's really tested most of these things. So we had some examples of that in the book, and that then however we then next noticed this is mostly not about Asia. So the book we're starting off with today, Tocqueville Karaoke, grew out of mainly discussions with Asian participants of how and why is Asia different. And so mainly this chapters 1 and 2, thank you for adding numbers, which the publisher forgot to do. Karaoke together versus bowling alone, how scenes illuminate Western rules and and how we can see things, how we can learn by moving internationally. So we had about 7-8 years of discussions, and this book is the fruit of that series of concerns. There are 3 parts to the book. The first one is on Tocqueville's theory of participation, and the dependent variable is legitimacy. What generates legitimacy? And we find internationally huge differences. In Latin America, maybe 10% of the citizens say they trust the government, the national government, they trust the police, they trust the press, they trust their neighbors. Very few. In Sweden, Denmark, 90% of the people say, of course I trust my neighbors, I trust the police, and so forth. The US, Western Europe are about 50%. So we find big differences internationally. China is higher than Sweden or Denmark. The Chinese citizens say there's a huge, they trust lots of these institutions. Lots of people say, oh, they must be fudging the data somehow. We've looked at 30 or 40 papers on trust in China, and the more we look at it, the more complicated it is. And people have tried to look at ways of measuring fear of saying the wrong thing. They interview Chinese who are permanent immigrants abroad and who live outside China, and they say very similar things to those inside China. So it's not a simple issue. And so at the same time, so we find big differences in the level of trust. Then the question is, what generates trust? And the classic answer globally, even especially in Latin America, which is the major low trusting area, most of the advanced researchers are using Tocqueville, and updated slightly by Robert Putnam. And that in turn leads to the question of, does this work? And the answer is relatively well in Western Europe, especially Northwestern Europe. But if you go to Asia, most of the core ideas, and this came out in the PhD by Seoko Kim, which is chapter 3 or so, I think, in the book. Or there's a summary. It's not the full PhD at all, but it's gives you a flavor of what he's done. And basically, he's looked at what's the Tocquevillian hypothesis? If it's easy to, Alan, if you're there, if we can scroll down a little bit to that boxes and arrows.
Yeah, this is the abstract of so-called King's paper.
Can we back up to the chapter before and just get the path diagram? Basically,
this one?
Yes, there we go. Perfect.
4 models.
First, model 1 and 2 are Tocqueville. Civic participation generates trust. And the Swedes are the high, the Mexicans, the Argentines, the Colombians are the low on both. Model 3, maybe 4, Asia. Cases are low, they have low civic participation in general, but they're high on trust. Japan most especially. However, Korea is a big exception. Korea has more participation than does the US, but it does not generate trust. That is, the citizen surveys of individual Korean citizens show people who participate more do not have more trust. Why not? Are there other things which make this spurious, such as at the bottom of model 3 or model 4 here, that if we have a zero relation, there must be some people who are participating in ways that are generating less trust. And why and where might that be the case? Okay, so these were the big questions leading into this book. Where and why does Tocqueville not work? And the findings are detailed in Seoko Kim's chapter as general background. But then when we get into the harder questions of how and why do these patterns change, it gets more subtle and interesting. And so one thing we have just with a list of the scenes dimensions there is to see how do we have differences in terms of these 15 types of scenes, as that's been one contextual measure. That is the scene within which this works. Maybe the nation, or it may be one town, or it may be a subgroup like the elderly or African Americans. Because within the US, where we've got a lot more research on this, African Americans are very low in trust. They're closer to, in my neighborhood of Bronzeville, I'm very conscious of this. There's a lot of distrust and anger in ways that is generalized against the national government, against the mayor. Mayor Lori Lightfoot in Chicago was elected largely because she ran against the political establishment, as did Trump. And they both succeeded, although they had very different programs, but they were similar in sort of stoking the distrustful themes. Okay. So theme 1. Theme 2, shift to, so we're leaving it as a question as to how does it work and why in part 1 on Tocqueville. Part 2 is about the link to economic growth. What drives the economy? Are there new factors of economic growth and the strong? So if we back up a little bit, or no, this is section 2. Yeah, Bohemia, economic growth. Sorry. So we have just 2 papers representing this here, and the background we saw was Baudelaire and Balzac, who said, basically, as we saw little bits, Bohemia drives creativity. Creativity drives economic growth. We need these people. Do we need these people in goth black outfits to make high-tech work in Silicon Valley? That's what some people are claiming. So this demands more closely looking at new forms of economic growth. The theory coming from Bohemia was best known by Jane Jacobs, who used one case, Greenwich Village, to say, we got the best creative people in New York and in the world. They come here because this is offbeat and unusual. We're more tolerant, and that tolerance leads to more creativity. This was Balzac and Baudelaire's idea. Let us do what we want. Don't bother us to dress up and and be proper at a so-called bourgeois dinner table and the like. Make conversation as you do in a salon, which we hate, a proper, elegant salon. And so the Greenwich Village example has then led to many challenges, and what's right about it, or how generalizable is it, as we have more and more neighborhoods across the US and the world where people are doing bohemian things, where we find more activities that don't fit, and etc. So if we go to Asia, as we did with these conferences, and then say, do you have a bohemia the way they do in Paris? And what's the answer we got in Japan, South Korea, China, and Taiwan? What's bohemia? They never heard of it, for the most part. So in that sense, it looks as if at least the simple label and the simple way that this has been widely discussed in the West is falling flat in Asia. Okay, parallel logically to the first section, that Tocqueville doesn't work in Asia, Bohemia doesn't work in Asia, and the creative economy, that is, there's something wrong with the theory, because the Asians have very creative economies. They're growing faster than most of the rest of the world. So if it's not Bohemia, what is it? Okay, part 3 of the book basically says, look at the arts. There's arts and culture, and we've got potential keys for how these are working, which answer the questions in the first 2 parts of the book, and that the arts are transforming the ways that other things occur. Okay, that's the logic of why we're asking these questions, and we have then some new kinds of concepts. Glamour, buzz, cultural activities. That is, these set the stage in that they're new concepts and new findings. The most simple one was the chapter with, sorry, I'm not following you in terms of order here, Alan, but the chapter historically with Peter Octoberg. Peter came here and spent a summer in Chicago, and he, and we got the data that Robert Putnam had used for this Bowling Alone book, and other similar data internationally, and we tried to see does that top line work. And what I mentioned was yes in Northwest Europe, but yes in the sense that if we take one aggregated measure of participation by citizens, we then find that the Northwest Europeans are high, and that in turn is related to a transformation in, or at least a higher level of legitimacy and trust and confidence in others. We then went in a different direction. We knew that with the new political culture, we had a decline of traditional party politics, a decline. Yeah, this is fine. So this is the new political culture framework. That is, we had these new kinds of questions in the middle of social issues, social market individualism, questioning the welfare state is old. So the old left-right is changing. But we had globalization is changing things for sure. And it's changing the strong party structures. It's changing the national government emphasis to go down to the local and provincial and regional levels. It's undermining legitimacy of clientelism, and it's weakening class politics. Instead, we see the development of new flexible economy and consumption-driven lifestyle. Okay, so this comes from the new political culture framework. But if we look specifically at how some of this works, points 3 here, points 2 and 3 is we have new issues. Not just about rich versus poor, left versus right in the old sense, but gays, human rights, women, the environment. These are new issues that were largely ignored, even if they were fought over by advocates of these issues. Why don't you pay attention to the environment in the Socialist Party, in Germany, in Italy? And the answer was, get out of here, we're not interested in talking to you. They then became terrorists, the environmentalists did, for several years. After that, gradually things changed, and they were added. The issues were added. Issue specificity is a label for this, and the person who's made this also dramatically visible is Donald Trump, because he's tweeting about 3 different topics in the same posting, and he says things which many people would say contradict each other. All right. In his mind, they don't, perhaps, because he's engaging in a strong form of saying, my position on the environment has no relationship to my position on women, has no position to my relationship on China. These are 3 different issues in his mind. And so that's the issue specificity argument. But how much is we've done a lot of work on, and we show that in Italy was the country with the most integrated party, strong consistency of these patterns all going together. The US and some of the other places with very weak party structures, with decentralized elections, with all kinds of people, local candidates. You can campaign on human rights if you want and get elected in Chico, California, but nobody in the surrounding towns may have been campaigning at all on human rights. You can't do that in England. Why not? Because the national parties controlled to a considerable greater degree who gets slated. You can't run for mayor in Chico, California, unless the national party slate agrees to slate you. In the US, you do. So the primaries, the institution of primary elections change a lot of things and make things more local. All right, so that in turn opens up the political system and creates an opportunity for bringing in all sorts of new issues in ways that don't fit a national political party program. Okay, so that in turn led me and Peter Achterberg to say, let's look at the specific issues and see how they fit in this framework. So we looked at this, so the red thing says the consumption, public goods, and amenities. Let's look at these. And let's pay more attention to those that we have with the best data. And we found that Putnam was right for most issue areas, but he was wrong in one big one, the arts. That there's a huge growth in the number of people joining voluntary associations involved with the arts. Putnam says nothing about this in the whole book called Bowling Alone. So that in turn led us to start focusing on the arts. I myself was interested in the arts privately, but I'd never done any serious social science research on the arts at that point. This was 15, 20 years ago. Okay, that's changed my life, as you can see, in terms of thinking and analyzing, and this course is now trying to do it in a serious way of looking at what specifically do the arts change in a place and how we think and act and work and consume, and how does this change the dynamics of the whole rest of politics, economics, and social life. Okay, that's the general background, but the answer is the art. That is a key to an answer is look at the arts, because other things are in decline. These are taking off, and these are taking off. We also find among young people. Young people are usually seen as the future. These are 20 to 30, and I mentioned then we can go down to such things as local areas. If you go down and compare all the metro areas in the US, which are growing in different age cohorts, especially young people. Number one in the US, Chicago, for the age 25 to 34. So what are these young people in Chicago coming here for? And what is there about the arts that brings them here? Or how is this different from San Diego or Dallas or Paris or somewhere else? These are the big background questions which lead into Can Tocqueville Karaoke and the beginnings of answers in some of what's here. But the Chinese, as you can imagine, for the reasons I've outlined, got very interested in this. And they're really doing this with money, with staff, with commitment from a minute. That is, we have no Ministry of Culture. So no one is investing or thinking in these bigger terms in the way that people do in China or France or places. So France I cite, and the reason France and China were using more actively in this course is that France has done this for hundreds of years. Versailles, etc. Arts politics is old stuff in France, and we know the French models. We saw this with theories, arguing over them with Bourdieu and with others, and then with Laurent Fleury, with these new models of how is Bourdieu maybe out of date or linked with a particular aspect of French culture, which no longer maybe is salient among younger persons, etc. So it's not a question that one is right or wrong, but where and why are these more limited or more generalizable in their frameworks? Okay, so given the French background, the big question, so then China is critically important for theorizing about this. So we can go to China perhaps and see the future the way Tocqueville said, I want to go to America. I'm writing for the French and for the Europeans, but I'm going to tell you what will be in the future for France because I will look at the future. All right, so in that sense, I'm suggesting we can be like Tocqueville and look at China, and let's look at Bo Chen, what Bo Chen had to say. Is he in this paper, they've got some very new interesting things just this week. He spent 2 years here. He's the director of research of the center in Wuhan, Institute of Culture.
Should I play it from the start?
Yes,
Dear
please.
Professor Clark, dear guys from University of Chicago, I'm Bo Chen from Wuhan University, China. It's my honor to join your class and share with you my research on China's culture scenes in recent years, including both rural and urban areas. I've shared my PPT with you. Now I will briefly introduce the relevant content, and also I hope you guys can enjoy my Chinese accent. There are three aspects. One is that culture scenes of China. One is that rural culture scenes of China. The other is urban culture scenes. And the third is the comparative interpretation between them. As we all know, in the past 40 years, Chinese economy has made great achievements. With rapid urbanization, Chinese rural culture has become hollow inside. Cultural resources have been transferred to cities and towns. The original infrastructures has changed significantly, and the rural culture scenes has also changed significantly. The Chinese government attached great importance to the construction of rural culture, and a large number of resources are invested in the countryside. But at the same time, the supply of rural cultural resources has also an obvious tendency of formatting. In Chinese cities, the supply of cultural facilities is very good, but in rural areas, there are only one public museum, one public library, one public center, and there are several cultural stations at the lower level of the county, which are also cultural rooms in the villages. So we call it a formatted supply. Our research focused on how to reconstruct rural cultural space and rural cultural scenes in China. We choose to look at some issues such as the means of transportation for cultural participation, stay time, evaluation of existing cultural facilities, evaluation of cultural activities, farmers' major cultural participation, interest, participation frequency, and etc. We found that the firstly, cultural expedition, online or in person, is positively correlated with both education and income level. Secondly, when traveling to cultural facilities, transport method, facilities location, traffic time, visit frequency, and leisure time are all important factors that need to be considered. Thirdly, with line chart and two bar charts, we discovered that physical cultural space is generally within a radius of 40 kilometers of an average rural resident's home, and the most popular cultural activities take place within 5 kilometers radius of residence. The last, the survey cultural facilities surveys and activities indicate that the setting of rural cultural lives should be primarily ingenuine, corporate, and exhaustivist. We have some indications. First, transport system in village and towns should be built with border pedestrians, roads, and motorcycle lanes. And if possible, public transport systems should reach to villages to help more people explore cultural space outside. Cultural facilities and services that are neighborhood-oriented should be built close to more villages. Government should try to bring back the sense of belongingness to villages to make everyone feel equal and more connected. Sports and art-related activities are recommended. Villages should receive more information sessions regarding purposely artisanal culture source for set betterment. Our results indicate that many interviews, though, have a utilitarian mandate, a lot of how to fully use cultural resources and still consider the culture-related activities to be pure entertainment and for physical strength. Part 2, urban areas. Actually, we have an ongoing paper The cultural scenes, patterns, and cities of China, empirical study based on cultural amenities in 31 capital cities. Course with Xin Yulin, we selected 31 cultural scenes of cities in China for analysis, and from that, they can be divided into 4 categories. Christmas scenes, located scenes, expression scenes, regional identity scenes, which basically match the whole line. I have some expression about whole line. According to the data of Fifth National Census in 2000, the accurate calculated by ARCGIS shows that the southeast half of China, calculated by Hu Huanyong's line, accounted for 43.8% of the national land area and 94.1% of total population. So we have some key findings. First, according to a score of urban scenes dimension of cultural amenities in China capital system cities, Chinese urban scenes can be divided into 4 categories and present the gathering in geography space. Secondly, the main dimension of distinguished Chinese urban scenes is seriality, including glamorous, exhibition society, laboring, and so on. Most urban scenes patterns are single and excessive type, showing the cities and getting signal, characterized by locality and nationalism in the local scenes, suggesting that the development of many cities in China is still in the stage of producing oriented urban development. In addition, the current urban development is accompanied by the weakening of its unequalness and neighborhoods. Certainly, at present there may be a deviation between urban planning and reality. So, urban planning should grasp and form its own scene characteristic. The underdeveloped areas need to be give full play to the unequal charm, build differential cultural brands, and form advantage of back workplace. Seascape theory can be guiding for urban planning and positioning. The fourth, the location of seascape theory in China still need to be improved, such as dimension definition, translation of special terms, and so on. These people constructed the method and process from cultural amenities to scenes, score to spatial analysis, and applies to Chinese urban research to supply and expand the applications of scenes theory in China. At last, I have some idea about the cultural scenes. The cultural scene theory and its dimension design have a very distinct Western cultural meaning, and the cultural expression and the existence of each place are very different. My idea is that it is more meaningful to replace cultural scenes with cultural space in China, including physical spaces, spiritual spaces, and mechanism spaces. If it interests you, you can look on the PPT about page 28. We have been doing research in these areas in recent years, and we have received strong support from Professor Terry Clark. I want to express my gratitude to Professor Terry Clark. We also hope to work with you to promote the research of Chinese culture policy, disseminate general content. I wish you world peace and healthy in all parts of the world. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we talk about these two themes? That is the bigger themes of why are we doing this? Why study the arts at all, and how far can they take us? And then second, the specific example of these new findings. This is I mean, they've got multi-million dollars of money. They've got, that is, this is a national survey. I think there's something like 40,000 people who were interviewed. That's much more than the budget of the General Social Survey. It's the General Social Survey over years and years, whereas they did this in just a couple of years. So they've got amazing resources, such as you saw all the individual items they have in rural areas. And And so one big issue is how much is globalization changing? And so, yeah, this is great. I am not aware of this facility. We do not have this. I never visit. I rarely, I sometimes, and so forth. So we have this for these individual activities. We don't have this in any other country of the world in such a nice way. The closest is the DDB, which we used in the Cities and Entertainment Machine. But these are fantastic data, and so they permit a more fine-grained analysis of. But okay, so the dramatic. I mean, one dramatic discussion point is: are these isolated old men playing cards or traditional Chinese activities in their central square? The answer is no. What's their number one activity? They watch television. Number two, they're surfing the web. And three, the internet. They do online games. We've got all kinds of things these are very computer connected people. They're thinking globally, or at least certainly nationally, and they don't look very isolated, or at least their activities include a range of the more traditional and this more global potentially interpenetrating each other. At the same time, yes, they play chess, and there's a little bit of ancestor worship. Church and temple museums are pretty low, but they've got lots of other things which look very urbane. So in that sense, this is a new image. But then the next question is how do they classify these in terms of the meaning that they give to them, and that leads to their types, where they generated these types called charisma, or the other four. I think they have four scenes or four types which have different colors here. This, in a sense, is a complement to demography, where we would measure, say, what's the income or the birth rate or the death rate or the number of people who are rich or poor, old or young, men or women, in all these places. That's what people have done traditionally, and they still do in most of the world. They don't have data about the kinds of questions which they do in his survey. And so what they've done is to then say, if we don't just ask simple descriptive questions like race, class, and gender in the questionnaires, but we also ask, what cultural activities are you engaging in? Then they get these four types. And so in a sense, they're adding cultural meaning to the demographic processes, such as, should I stay in my local town, or should I move to Beijing? And that's a big, hot national issue, because the Chinese are trying desperately not to have the kind of shanty towns, the favelas, which surround all the Latin American countries and create lots of crime, lots of difficulties, low trust, cracking down by the police. The president of Brazil is a very, very tough guy. And it's related in part, and Colombia's been having civil wars for decades. They're trying to avoid that at the same time that they're looking to keep everyone engaged and feel that things are more legitimate. And in terms of trust, my God, they're over the top. So how are these pieces of policy working? At least you see in the seriousness, the richness of the data, the kinds of answers we're getting with Bo Chen are interesting examples for everybody to think about around the world, from China to Argentina to France. Okay, so in this sense, this is provocative stuff. Any reactions to this from anyone from France or anyone? I mean, Brandon, I'm going to ask a few times, because he's worked especially in Latin America and in Mexico, and he knows some of that literature in ways that I don't know how much the rest of you do. But any reactions to this from a sort of Latin American standpoint, Brandon?
On like anything like in particular or just in general?
If you were if you were Bo Chen and you had a couple of $1 million and big staffs and you could do national, that is, they get their money especially from the Ministry of Culture. The Ministry of Culture contracts out, and they're the leading center in all of China that does these big surveys. So they've been doing this for 20 years or so. So they've got a lot of expertise in doing this. If you could do that for Latin America, what would you do that might give you more insight about what's happening in cultural activities in Latin America in ways that we could build on in some manner?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is just kind of built into a lot of the texture of everyday life. So in terms of like religious processions and like a lot of things that, you know, may look cultural to like a cultural practice to like, which are cultural practices, but might be understood in like different ways. So there's like kind of like a different relationship with like I feel like religion than in the US. And there's also like, this kind of goes into my own interests, but like the strong drive of like tourism on a lot of this stuff, especially like indigenous cultures and stuff that are kind of dependent upon tourism and different kinds of like cultural production that they are producing, which is like a little bit different from the way some of that stuff happens in the US. So those are two things that come to mind. But
I mean, that's terrific. You're putting your finger right on that. Religion is officially not supported in China, and so maybe, but I mean, there are other things around the edges. But that's a huge difference as well between France and the U.S. That is, the U.S. internationally has got a lot of religious participation. France is very low. So in that sense, France and China are similar, etc.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like a lot of the Latin American countries, they don't officially espouse like a religion, but it's like the populations are, you know, 80-90% like Roman Catholic, at least like nominally. So that exerts like a big force. And it's like I think that there are ways that just kind of like bleeds into everything else in a way that the US and France is even more strict with like keeping all of that stuff separate.
Okay, well, those are two excellent points. And Santiago Hafner has raised his hand, and he's our French expert in residence. Santiago, what are your reactions to all this?
No, I just had a question because I'm French, but I'm also Colombian, and
all right, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I'm actually in Bogota right now, in Colombia. And I wanted to know like the impact of the Bohemian conception behind the cultural scenes in Latin America. Has it like been very strong? Because I want to take the case of Bogota here, for example. There's there's not a lot of places where, for example, comparing it to Chicago, there's no like big park like in Chicago, like the Millennium Park, where people can go and like walk and have like nice nice long walks and stuff like that. And in difference to France, there are also no places where there's like a big bohemian neighborhood. But there have been some places, like some cafes around the town, like in the past few years, that have sprung up. And I wanted to know if you had like some info on how like the bohemian ideology like adapt to Latin American cities.
Now, that's an excellent question. I wish I had an excellent answer, but I don't. Maybe I should stop there and say that I don't think we have a single really good paper on that per se. Brandon might think of something that I don't know, but I guess the main example I think of in terms of Colombia and Bogota is the fact that it was part of the national government. That is, the mayors in all of Colombia were not just slated or in for elections. They did not have elections 30 years or so ago in Colombia. Then Mayor Mocus, here he is running for mayor. Is he part of the Bohemia? Look at the beard, look at the outfit. He's breaking the rules of the game by running. And does he know about France? He has a PhD in mathematics from a French university. So yes, he knows about the French case. His mother is an artist, so he knows about using the arts. And he was a revolutionary, as it says there, in that he broke a lot of the rules. Colombia, like most of the world, has strong party politics, and the national political parties would said, you may run for mayor, you may not run for mayor. And this is the biggest city in Colombia by far. And he ran with no party and won. He was president of the university. Before that, he was a professor of mathematics. He was interested in first in his mathematics stuff, but he was also interested in philosophy in a broad sense, overlapping with questions of trust and with building participation among citizens. As it says here as well, 6 times the US murder rate, violence, and massive drug-related crime, political corruption that was just taken for granted by most people. And so he did things like get that spandex outfit and walk around, and the media went wild, say, who is this guy? You know, I mean, he can't be serious. Well, he was serious and he won. So you were not allowed to serve more than, I think, 1 or 2 terms. He then served his 1 or 2 terms. He was replaced by Peñalosa. Peñalosa was another colleague in planning, really, from the University of Columbia. And then after Peñalosa served as mayor for 1 or 2 terms, Mocus came back. Mocus then ran for president of Colombia, and he had something like 40% of the vote a few weeks before the election. But then he lost, but he had nevertheless illustrated a lot of support in Bogota. And just in terms of your question about the lack of parks, he too was concerned that there were parks in Bogota, and there was one that was fairly central in the city area, but it was quote controlled by the drug gangs. They were selling drugs, and it was too dangerous for people to walk in the park. And so if you think people are worried about walking in the parks in Chicago, and the mayors closed them down because they're politically sensitive here, it was a lot more so in Bogota. And so Mocus said, you know, my fiance and I are going to get married, and we want to have a celebration with our wedding in some way that will feature the importance of parks. And so he then said, we're going to get married, and we will each arrive, and we won't go down an aisle. We will each arrive on elephants. We'll come in with 2 separate elephants, and then we will be joined. And anybody can, all of you are invited. Everyone in Colombia is invited to our wedding, and you can contribute some money to transform this park into a usable park for the citizens, and we will take it away from the drug lords. And people contributed lots of money, and they cleaned it up, and the drug lords lost the park. Okay, so that's one little case study of using bohemian creative lifestyle policies to transform and make a political attack. And why is this important as a political attack? Because the city council, many would say, was largely influenced in its voting by the drug lords. So they were consistently attacking what he as the mayor was doing or trying to do. And he couldn't do things with votes from the council. He would have 80% whatever of the council voting against him. So he could only govern by doing things that were symbolically important, like wearing a spandex outfit and coming up with amazing new things to do. But the point is, he did it brilliantly in ways that illustrated aspects, I would say, of bohemian thinking, at the same time that you had well-dressed, classically traditional suits by at least the visible people in the city council. Okay. Any other reactions or questions about China? We're trying to bring China in here and maybe contrast with your French and Colombian experience for Santiago or anybody else.
I'm curious about one figure you just pointed out. Religious go to the temple and go to the church. So it doesn't happen often, but I don't know where this survey is conducted. I mean, in some parts of China, even today, a lot of people still celebrate in Spring Festival, and they worship their particular gods. And I just found a very interesting video showing how folk religion is celebrated in China. It's just a 2-minute short video, but it illustrates that this is a very important cultural activities in some parts of China, particularly in Fujian, which is in the southeast part of China. It's in here, and they worship a trade goddess called Mazu, and they do it all the time. But yeah, that's probably a rational way to do so, because it would safeguard the trade and commerce for people living in there. Yeah, I have a short video, but I don't know if it's relevant to. I mean, that's the short folk religion celebration in China during Spring Festival.
What if we hold it for a second until
Yeah.
we get some of the bigger points in the bigger presentations? I see
Sure.
Kishi is with us today, and do you have anything you want to add at this stage? So we'll show the other videos as I introduce this. You were the one who brought in these videos to us today. But any thoughts as we're starting, or you want to comment on anything?
Tony raised a hand.
Yeah, Tony or Kishi, but Tony, why don't you go ahead if your hand is up? Kishi can either comment now or later as you like.
Okay. Yeah. So I had an observation from Mr. Chimbo's PowerPoint. One that's about the urban scenes in China, and he pointed out how the distinguishing factor of Chinese urban scenes is theatricality, and that a lot of the cities are getting more and more similar, and there's a weakening of uniqueness and neighborliness. And that sort of reminded me of sort of the current reading of some of the research I've been doing on cultural industries, and then that culture and tourism are becoming an important, sort of more and more important sector, cultural tourism, and how that will be sort of increasingly important in terms of driving this unique sense of identity, especially for sort of smaller cities, because of the general way that commercial districts, restaurants, and shopping malls, these are all becoming sort of popular destinations for tourists, but it is the local sort of more distinct cultural elements, the historical legacies that are underdeveloped, and those are, I guess, some type of those theatricality and the sense of uniqueness and neighborliness that are to be developed if the cultural industry is to be sort of propelled and be boosted more. And because I found this a lot when I was doing my research on nightlife, because culture tourism is becoming is mentioned more and more often as a very important part of promoting the night economy and helping people to come out and consume and enjoy their lives at night. So that is my brief comment about that.
That's an excellent point. And that could be seen as either rational or non-rational, depending on your theorist and what you do at night, I guess. Do you see any people, just in terms of the, I guess the earlier question about Bohemia, any visible signs of people wearing goth outfits, like our goth girl, as she calls herself, reading Baudelaire? Or is that just as people walking around in Chinese cities? Or is anything like that, or minimal?
Not so much, I guess.
No.
Okay, then that's, I mean, that's an answer. That's a quick,
Yeah.
simple answer.
Yeah, I think there are some softer version of goth girl in China, but most of the girl, they wear more, Japanese pink, very lovely, kawaii kind of style. I mean, a goth girl in China is so rare. You don't see any of them. Well, there are softer version of goth girl, but that's a different genre. Yeah.
But this is important. That is part of that is in terms of, well, okay, let's not go too far along that line, but let's keep that in mind about goth girl, that there are not many goth girls looking for love in the traditional way in the Summer Palace. But let's maybe we should move on toward the Summer Palace, and we've got sure, should we get the shall we do that maybe now?
So I'm sorry. So I'm not sure which Summer Palace video to show.
This is it. Yeah, this is it.
Okay, sure.
Just
sure.
started. Yeah, you mean where, what to play?
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I have two Summer Palace video. One by Dr. Qiji, one by this professor. Yeah, maybe this one
Okay.
first. Okay.
Yeah, I have not seen. I've not seen the other one. Yeah,
Okay,
how about doing the other one? If this is from Qiji.
Another one is more.
Introduction of Summer Palace, and it just as a background of Summer Palace.
Oh, but that's great, because most people have no idea what the Summer Palace is.
Yeah. Okay.
We can show this first.
Photo of the Summer Palace right here. I was there this summer. Got a couple of
Great.
This is the old Summer Palace.
Okay.
It's 20 kilometers to the northwest of the Forbidden City. It's an enormous multifunctional complex for the emperor to work and live, and the alternative political center of Qing Dynasty other than the Forbidden City. Work began in 1709 and continued for more than a century and a half, producing a vast imperial palace and gardens with more than 150 complexes. In a letter condemning British and French troops for looting and destroying the palace, the French writer Victor Hugo said it had been one of the wonders of the world. I'm now at one of the most beloved complexes of the emperor's Tan Dang Dang, which means clear conscience and broad mind. The big and deep well behind me was originally a huge goldfish pond with an area of 1,000 square meters. In Emperor Qianlong's mind, the goldfish were a symbol of his people. So during his day, he would often come here in the morning to feed and observe goldfish to show.
So I'm gonna stop here and look into the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
But in a sense, this looks like Versailles. That is, it's a
Yeah.
huge consumption, glamorous, elegant construction, in a time when, very few people could think or dream of anything as glamorous and fantastic.
Okay.
This is Victor Yang, the head of Department of Cultural Industry Management of Communication University of China. I'm quite pleased to meet you in the website. Professor Qi has asked me to say something about the Chinese cultural industries with scenario theory. I'm very glad to share my research experience and to show some Chinese stories. In my perspective, I think the theory is quite close to the placemaking. There are 4 elements I think it's quite important. That is cultural environment, cultural event, cultural facilities, and people participation. Last year, I have done a program about the historic garden in Beijing, including Summer Palace. Our research program is to how this kind of garden to make cultural productions from his historical resources. So there's something about the scenery series when they to make itself more creative. My focus is on the cultural event in the garden. Recent years the Summer Palace has created some very good special event to attract people to make the garden more fascinating on culture. The Summer Palace originally named Qing Yiyuan, or the Garden of Clear Ripples. It was first constructed in the 780s. 1750. It was razed to ground by the Anglo-French allied forces in 1860. The government of Qing Dynasty started to rebuild it in 1886 with the fund that it has misappropriated from the Imperial Navy and other resources. Renamed 2 years later as Yiheyuan, or the Garden of Health and Harmony, it was supposed to serve as a summer resort for the Empress Dowager Cixi. Cixi is a very important woman in Chinese histories. In Qing Dynasty, she has ruled China for 47 years. It's quite important, a woman. I'm not sure whether you have been to Summer Palace before. Now, it's a very good, important historical site for tourists. Known as the Summer Palace, it was ravaged by the allied forces of the 8 powers that invaded China in 1800. The damage was repaired in 1902. Since the founding of the People's Republic of China, the Summer Palace has undergone several major renovations. The government has put a lot of money to promote, to restore it, to make it more better for tourists. So the major attractions such as the 4 great regions, Suzhou Street, the Pavilion of Bright Sceneries, Wuchang Galleries, and everything. So nowadays, when you come to the garden, you can see quite a lot of historical things, include the building, including some board with stories on it to show the history, to show some life stories of Cixi and other kind of things. So the environment is quite good in the perspective.
So I suggest Dr. Qi giving us some comment or something. Is Qi?
Hi, what?
Do you want me to show all the video or just part of it?
Just this video, and you want to show another video?
No, I think this video is about 11 minutes long, but which part you want me to show?
And I think you it is too long for me. Yes.
I think you know what's gonna be
Okay.
shown.
I think you can skip some, and the last part, the cultural participation.
So last few minutes.
Yeah, last 3 minutes, cultural participation.
It's quite special, and this day has made a very good influence. This is just one of the events by the Summer Palace. Besides that, the Guardians still create other kind of cultural activities to make the garden more cultural, more fascinating, more better for young people to learn. So to celebrate the 217th anniversary founding of Summer Palace in Beijing, it still held some lectures to public in 2020. The lectures held at least once a month will cover various topics including architectures of ancient Chinese gardens, Qing dynasty histories, preservation of cultural relics, and antique appraisal. Entrance for the lecture are open for reservation online through the WeChat and other kind of means. So from these different culture events or activities, the Summer Palace become more cultural. Besides the old buildings, there are still culture. From the old buildings, you can learn much from some old historical things. Of course, there are some commercial stores to sell some creative productions, which is from the old relics. So with different means to promote its culture, the Summer Palace has been a good scenery to feel culture, to express culture, and also they can give you a place to discuss different cultural topics. I think this is a good example for the scenery series. Okay, I think my time is enough. Welcome to COC and welcome to China to visit Summer Palace. Of course, Beijing is a large city with a long history, with a lot of historical relics. Maybe there's possibilities. Come to China. I will lead you to visit all this kind of place of interest. Many thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, our time is pushing on pretty rapidly. Any other questions or comments from either Professor Qizhi or anyone else?
Okay, I think Professor Yang gave an introduction about Summer Palace. And I think there are 3 important points about Summer Palace. And the first, I think, from the culture and tourism spot to culture community is very important for Summer Palace. And at last, it just as a cultural heritage to protect the cultural heritage. And now it open to the consumers and people. And now the Summer Palace rebuilt and connect to the community around it. And a lot of people living nearby participate in a lot of cultural activities in Summer Palace. And it promotes the neighborhood development. And the second, I think, from as Summer Palace and as a case, it is very important to say that nowadays the sense is not only a single sense, and now Beijing built the sense group in around the Summer Palace. For example, we mentioned the Sanshan Wuyuan, 3 mountains and 5 parks. and we integrate them together, and not only Summer Palace, but also including other culture and tourism spots nearby. And all these formed science groups, and in this way to promote the culture industry's development. And the last one, I think Summer Palace become to change from only tell about the historical stories to tell a lot of new civilization. And Dr. Yang also mentioned that in Summer Palace, they developed a lot of cultural products, and to such as they use IP, use Summer Palace as a big IP, and there are a lot of creative products, and they also can attract a lot of young people to go to Summer Palace. And after they travel this, and there are some characteristics about these things, and some dimensions can influence their culture conception and cultural activities. So I think this is the value of things in Summer Palace.
Okay, well, thank you. Jimin, how long is your video? Should we try and to do that today if we've got 5 minutes, or would that work for you, or is that you need more time?
It depends on your decision, but my guess was about like 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, now we got about we have about 11 minutes, I think. Or no, about 9. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Should you want to get? Well, I guess you've got it right there. That is. How about the theory? What's the big theoretical rationale for looking at this? I mean, that's I think valuable both for China and for North Korea.
So I think the point is to see the fact that the display of power through cultural activities like mass games or plays or movies reproduces charismatic and personalistic domination in some countries like North Korea. And as we all know from Max Weber, that he believed that charismatic power is limited in time and eventually dwindles away as the society returns to a routine, normal, everyday order. But curiously enough, somehow the North Korean leaders have succeeded in reproducing charismatic power for quite a long period. And I think one possible way to answer this puzzle would be to see North Korea as a theater state. The term coined by anthropologist Clifford Geertz, in which rituals, performances, and spectacles of power are fundamental in making domination look legitimate and fundamental in inducing consent from the below. So I guess these shows that building social solidarity or trust is not always driven by individual motives and individual participation, but sometimes by the values of collective symbols such as family, independence, or welfare, or by social recognition and struggle for sort of cultural prestige, which are also defined collectively.
Okay, that's excellent. It raises a big analytical question of how build a legitimate political and social system. And it also says maybe Tocqueville is wrong for Asia, in the sense that it's not the it's not the little local church in a New England town, which is the driver for North Korea. We've got just a minute or so, but just to have these questions linger in all of our minds till we continue on Wednesday, do you want to just show a little bit of one of these large spectacles as you've seen these elsewhere? But these are pretty powerful.
Should I play part of this mass game?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, please. Maybe stop. I mean, that's enough to say,
yeah.
This is not just Marilyn Monroe or, one star in Hollywood or the French cinema. It's a mass, spectacular, disciplined, highly trained kind of activity. And and how does it work? I mean, so bringing in Gertz, and then thinking about this and the ways that these can be and are used is a valuable challenge to our, often, let's say, especially anybody from political science, the public choice individual, leaving out the state and the outside actors, is really challenged by what we see here in an extreme version in these videos in North Korea. Okay, time is out for now. We're going to continue on Wednesday along with similar themes. Try to read, everyone. Ask some questions. Brandon's having a meeting, and we will continue. And thank you again, Kiji, for bringing in these new examples of new stuff. And we haven't even seen some of the others which have already arrived from China. So it's dramatic, and it's illustrating your point that China is the major center of this new kind of thinking. So thank you, Kiji. Bye-bye, everybody. We'll see you Wednesday.